start it off, though, with something that we heard on Twitter. Some young people saying, we want to be the leaders, but teach us. You said something interesting, Liz, in the green room there.
For what it's worth, I feel like, as a member of my generation, that we owe young African American children of color an apology. I mean, I was listening to what you were saying about 18-year-olds saying, you know, why should I do this? You know, I'm just going to get killed anyway. Why should I get a high school diploma? We have left this generation in the worst shape that any generation has ever been in before. Our young people, if they get arrested by a cop that's just looking for them, they can't get a job because they have to put it on their application. I mean, we allowed that kind of legislation to pass. We didn't teach our young people to fight. Thurgood Marshall said after the Brown versus Board of Education, he was like, okay, yes, this is done. We got the law, we're going to win. What he also said was, I didn't realize the opposition to Brown versus Board of Education. In other words, we didn't teach anybody how to fight after the win. And that's what I want to apologize to the young generation, because we did you wrong. We did not teach you how to fight. We didn't teach you the significance of fighting. We didn't teach you that there is a fight after the win.
But isn't this country so much better than the 1960s and the civil rights movement of that era?
Yeah.
It is in some real ways, and yet we're still seeing some real struggle, right? And we have to acknowledge that. And I think to this point that you just made, Paulo Freire, who's the author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, teaches educators and tells us that education, and a strong education, can actually be the means to your liberty. It can be the means to your freedom if we teach people how to embrace that struggle, if we teach our young people how to lead. But in order to do that, we have to affirm them. All of these messages that they're receiving right now tell them that their lives are of no consequence and of no value, right? Why should I graduate? Why should I go to college? Because Mike was doing all of those things, and yet he's still dead. And so we have to affirm our young people if we want them to lead us, and make them feel of value so that they can say, yes, I am ready to stand up and lead, and yes, you are giving me the right tools to do so.
So I think that brings where racial profiling happens outside of the police department, like in our schools, like when we have IEPs for 3-year-olds,
Absolutely.
when we have kids being overly represented in suspension and expulsion rates, when we have in-school suspension with no real teachers in the classroom. So, you know, she said it was hard because it is hard. I mean, it's hard regardless of your parents' educational levels. It's hard for all parents of color in particular. And so if we were having a broader conversation, we could talk about what does racial profiling look like at school? Right. And who gets lumped into which groups really quickly? And how does that impact their life? How does that impact their fight? How does that impact their conversation? So I think one of the really great things that came out of this is the voiceless got heard. And so this is an opportunity to expand that.
I think the situation is even crazier for young black people because we're not only judged by Caucasians of all sorts of sizes, but we're also judged by our own people. Like, as a young black male in school, if I was too politically inclined, or if I knew too much about a certain subject, or if I didn't dress a certain way and talk a certain way, then I'm judged by my peers. And so that creates this situation where I feel like there's nobody like me in this world. I'm by myself. I have no other people like me in this universe.
Because at some point it wasn't cool anymore to be smart, and it wasn't cool to be knowledgeable. And I received a lot of that when I was coming up through high school. You talk white. No, I use the King's English correctly. And I want to be something when I grow up. Or, you know, you're acting like a white girl. No, you know, this is just how I am, and this is how I grew up. And because, you know, the things that we experience in our own communities, it makes it even harder for us to move forward, and you know, that can do a lot to a woman's or a kid's self-esteem.
That's right.
And I also kind of think that when we say things like that, when people say you're acting white, or when people say that you are engaging in that behavior, it's another way of saying that we see that an individual, if they do something, is treated differently by the white teacher. Okay, so it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily that you're acting white, but something you're doing is causing the white teacher to treat you differently than the rest of the African American kids. Right. You know, so we have to struggle with that. We have to figure that out and understand that we're all treated the same after we walk out of the classroom, you know, I mean, so we all have that shared life experience in common.
Art, I want to go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, can we leave our audience with some hope?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you.
I can. So I think one thing your generation has done is they've built all of these different organizations and institutions for African Americans. There's the St. Louis American. There's the Nye Network that employs lots of African Americans. There are African American elected officials in the city. I replaced an African American woman in the state house, and she ran for city. I have a model right here next to me that I get to talk to every day. We have role models, we have institutions, and my thing in the past few years, what I've learned, hit epiphany, is that as African American youth, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to build all brand new things. We already have them there, and if we just use them and retweak them and make them better, there is no limit to what we can do.
I think young people are our hope, right? Young people are really our hope in this. And I think if we just let them lead, right, and we follow them without judging their clothes, without judging their music, without chastising how they choose to show their grief, if we let our young people lead, that's where our hope lies, if we just follow.